This is HealthCall Online, the place for extended versions of interviews you hear in our weekly radio broadcast, the HealthCall Radio Hour, now heard on more stations around the country as they join the HealthCall Radio Network. You know, there's nothing more important than our family's health, and that includes all the members of our family, even those on four legs. So when I found an article online that listed 14 foods that are toxic for dogs, well, it caught my attention, so I reached out to the author. She is Dr. Lisa Fiorenza. She is a holistic veterinarian, so we're going to find out about exactly what that means. She practices at the Longevity Veterinary Center in Whippany, New Jersey. Doctor, thank you for joining us. Tell me a little bit about holistic veterinary medicine. How is it different?
Hey, I'm Dr. Lisa Fiorenza. I'm technically an integrative veterinarian, meaning that I combine both conventional veterinary practice as well as holistic veterinary practice, which covers a whole lot of different things. The way that it differs from conventional medicine is that we're using more than just conventional pharmaceuticals for treating our patients. We do focus on prevention as well as treating what's actual disease. And we are trying to look at the whole patient and not just treat in a vacuum of abnormal lab work or anything else that is a little more typical or can be a little more typical of conventional medicine, where they're a little more focused in on specific issues as opposed to looking at the patient as a whole.
Gotcha. So instead of just treating the symptoms of arthritis in an older dog, you're going to take a look at a broader panoply of conditions that can be associated with that. So
Exactly.
what are some of those treatments that you might apply that a typical veterinarian would not?
So in the holistic realm, the number of possibilities and the things that you can have in your toolbox are nearly endless. It constantly amazes me every day, whether it's just being exposed to things that my colleagues are doing or having clients come in asking questions about specific modalities, the sheer number of options. And it's amazing how, having spent years studying this side of the field and picking a few major modalities for myself to specialize in, there's so much I don't know. And I think that's kind of how all of us in the holistic side of things feel. So it's really an incredible, you can continue learning forever.
So are you talking about things like acupuncture
Mhm.
and herbs and that kind of stuff?
Exactly. So what I specifically focus on is acupuncture, herbal medicine, and some nutrition medicine as well, or food medicine. I'm trained specifically in Chinese veterinary food therapy. And those three things, my training is all in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. So there's also Western herbs, which is where you start to think a little bit more of your people making liquid tinctures of different things. Our Chinese formulas are a little more, they've been around for thousands of years. They are specific formulas made that we use to treat specific patterns. But acupuncture, herbal medicine, and nutrition have a wide range of applications. They can be used for arthritis, aging issues, cancer, GI issues, a lot of the chronic illnesses that we see that conventional medicine doesn't seem to really fix. It may help, but it seems to miss the mark on really fixing these things.
Huh. You know, many people have dogs with skin and
Hmm.
allergy issues. Give me a quick once over on how Chinese-oriented medicine might address that.
Yeah, allergies are a huge one. I must see at least one allergy case a day, if not more. Um, so what I tell my patients is the first step is, if you're on a kibble or canned or other processed diet, if your pet has skin issues and GI issues, and most issues, but we'll start with those, you need to really try to transition to a fresh food diet. whether it's a frozen cooked food or I should say just a cooked food or a frozen raw food. Um, I don't worry about that, at least not right off the bat. I think just getting rid of that really heavily processed and often high carb food with the kibble is very helpful. It helps, I would venture to guess, maybe about half of my skin cases. And if it doesn't help them, that actually gives me a lot of information on what patterns we don't have. And that helps me to pick my herbs. So there's one whole pattern that responds very well to a less processed diet, and I can completely check that off the list if we have no diet response.
Gotcha. So an exclusionary diagnosis. Yeah.
And sometimes it just really fixes the patient if they do have that pattern.
Yeah. So when you said a fresh or frozen food, now are you applying a specific recipes and a specific diet, or is it just sharing what my family's eating?
So it depends a little bit on the dog. If we do feel like there has been, you know, chicken is one that a lot of people will bring up. And if we really truly feel that the patient is more itchy when they're fed chicken, then I will veer away from that. But in general, just doing something that's less processed is helpful. Um, as far as feeding what you're feeding, you have to make sure that what you're feeding and what you're eating is a balanced diet. So we do want a fresh food diet. We don't want a ton of pasta and things like that. We do want to stick to a lot of meats, veggies, um, sometimes starches, sometimes not. That's where it starts to get more nitpicky, and I help my patients and my clients to really fine tune that stuff. But in general, just starting off with the basics and just doing a good diet of fresh veggies and meat, adding multivitamins, just trying to balance it out with different things. There's some good online resources. I help my clients where I can. There's a lot of commercially prepared fresh food diets now, especially for dogs, but even a bunch for cats nowadays is definitely a growing area of interest.
Yeah, that is interesting. So that brings us around to the foods that we should not be feeding our dogs. And that is what originally brought me to you, your article with 14 different foods. So let's just walk through those and let's talk about all of the problems that they can cause. And one of them that is, I'm kind of surprised, is onions, garlic, chives, and leeks. Now, those are foods that I'm going to put in almost everything I eat, but it's not good for the dogs. What kind of problems might that result in?
So it's more, garlic in particular has a lot of really good medicinal properties. Um, you have to be very careful with the dose in dogs because in a decent sized dose, it's very toxic. It actually will break down a dog's red blood cells, which are the blood cells that bring oxygen to your tissues. So it causes something called immune-mediated hemolytic anemia, which the name changes a little bit from year to year, but it's a very dangerous disease that can require transfusions and serious treatment. So we want to avoid that. So I will tell patients, unless you're working with me directly, don't add garlic to the diet because we don't want to accidentally do too much. Cats are a lot
So,
more intolerant of garlic.
okay. So, the amount of garlic that I might put in a recipe, is that going to be, if I'm sharing my plate with my dog, is that going to be a problem? Or is it a high dose of garlic beyond what I might eat?
It depends on the dose of garlic. It depends on the size of the dog, and it depends on how much garlic you use. I'm Italian. I go overboard on the garlic for myself.
Yeah, well, I do too, yeah.
So for the most part, I would say about 1 clove per 50 pounds or so is usually safe. But in your, 5-pound dog, that starts to get really hairy. So you have to be
Got it.
careful. So, if your dog eats a whole thing of pasta sauce, you are probably veering on a potentially toxic dose there. So it's not impossible. The dose does have to be decently high, but in your small dogs, that can be a pretty small amount anyway.
Okay, and just don't want to overkill this, but onions and leeks, are they as toxic or is it predominantly the garlic?
They are, I would consider them as toxic. I'd have
Okay.
to double check. I think that they may be a little less potent, but I think they are pretty similar in toxicity.
There's another product, an artificial sweetener, xylitol. Tell me about this one.
So that one is found. One place that I tell people to watch for it in dogs in particular is your sugar-free peanut butters, because a lot of people do use peanut butter to give dogs medications. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have a diabetic in the house, human, then if you have that kind of peanut butter, you have to be really careful. The other big place is we'll see dogs get into it in sugar-free gum. If they go into your purse or it falls down and they get into sugar-free gum, that's going to give them a big whopping dose because the gum tastes good. So they like it. They start chomping it down and they're, 10 pieces in and we have an issue. It can actually cause very dangerously low blood sugar, where dogs sometimes need to be hospitalized on an IV drip with sugar in it.
Wow.
And in very high doses, it can actually even cause liver failure. So it's a pretty serious one.
Okay, so that's xylitol. This one I'm surprised at. Ice cream, milk, and dairy. So dogs love cheese, right? What's the harm here?
They do, they do. As an integrative practitioner and someone who's interested in food therapy, I just tend to avoid, especially cow's milk in general, because it's just inflammatory. It can cause stomach upset in anyone. There's a lot of people who find that off of milk they feel better. So any of my patients with chronic illness, I try to avoid any kind of dairy products, especially giving them on a daily basis. Once in a while as a treat, small amounts, maybe not so bad. But again, a lot of this depends on the size of your dog. You can't give a Chihuahua a whole bowl of ice cream. A Great Dane might be able to handle it, but size definitely is an
Yeah.
issue here.
And so that's the lactose reaction that many humans have. It's that kind of a problem.
And even just inflammation in general. Not everyone seems to be truly lactose intolerant, but they just
Mm-hmm.
seem to have more inflammation with the dairy. It can cause a lot of phlegm, like if you've ever had phlegm issues, or if you have a cold and you're having dairy, you realize that, oh gosh, I'm more phlegmy now, like I'm coughing and I'm drippy.
Yeah.
So it's that same thing. It causes inflammation in the gut, and that translates to inflammation in the whole body.
Yeah, well, I often comment on the fact that humans are the only species that consume another species' milk after childhood.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, it's kind of an odd thing when you think about it that way, right? Avocados, now, I can't imagine. I don't think I could get my dog to eat an avocado. Do some like them?
Um, I am. I'm still surprised by what dogs eat, but I've learned to be less surprised by what dogs eat. It must have been maybe 2 months ago. My sister, who has two very troublesome cats, called me on like a Friday night in a panic that her cat ate a whole avocado, and I was like, all right. So
Wow.
even cats are not immune to this, but some dogs do really like them. There's a couple of issues. They can certainly cause stomach upset, especially again if you're a smaller dog eating a large amount or a big dog eating like a really whopping amount,
Yeah.
because they're very high in fat. They can just upset the gut, cause really bad stomach ache. I have seen dogs eat an avocado whole or eat the pit because it smells and tastes like avocado and it can cause a blockage. So in small amounts, I don't have an issue with using the avocado flesh. It's not one that I tend to recommend to clients, but it can cause problems.
Okay. Grapes and raisins. Again, something, well, yeah, I could see a dog picking up a raisin off the floor if kids drop it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
One or two probably not going to hurt them. Again, it's a volume issue?
Grapes and raisins are weird. They're one that's not necessarily a volume issue. The problem is we don't know why they're toxic. There are a couple of theories
Oh.
that have been floating around. There's some that gained a lot of traction in the last few years, but then we seem to back off of them. So I don't think we know at this point why exactly they're toxic. It's not all the time. It's not every dog. One dog could eat a bunch of grapes and be fine, and
Hmm.
one dog could eat a few raisins and wind up in the hospital with kidney failure. Um,
Hmm.
so we just don't know what the toxic principle is. We don't know what's actually causing it, whether it's something, is it a mold on the grapes? Is it something to do with the dogs that seem to get the kidney failure from the grapes? We're just not sure at this point. So they're a scary one. I've had a friend's dog die of kidney failure after eating a bunch of raisins, and
Wow.
so I've always been very cautious with them. And I generally recommend seeing a vet, getting them to vomit it up as if they can, and then following up with blood work to ensure the kidneys are okay.
Yeah, why take the chance? That makes
Hmm.
sense. Stone fruit, so things like cherries, peaches, anything with a pit, here's what you're talking about, right?
Part of it is, again, an obstruction issue, like peach pits. I've actually seen cats obstruct on something as small as an almond. So if they eat it
Hmm.
whole, it can be an issue. There's also some cyanide in some of those seeds, so it can cause toxicity.
Okay. Same with nuts. They're on your list as well. Is that the issue? Is it a choking obstruction issue or something else?
It can be. Certain nuts may be more toxic than others. Um, that one, I think, that one I will say, I think my boss answered that part of the question. Um, so I might have to refer to his answer on the website there.
Well, we'll just steer away from nuts, yeah.
Thanks.
Baked goods in general. This goes back to the xylitol issue, I assume, but is there something else with baked goods?
Um, I don't tend to see a lot of xylitol in baked goods. I'm sure that maybe ones that are made for diabetic people might have xylitol in them. There's always chocolate is an issue. So
Right. And dogs
there,
can't process the bromine in chocolate, right? Isn't that the issue?
yeah, they can get it again is dose dependent, but they can get just stomach upset. They can get heart issues, and in really high doses, they can even wind up with seizures and serious
Hmm.
issues. Um,
Yeah.
so it's not to be toyed with. It's a potentially dangerous one. Um,
R- Raw meat and raw eggs. So I'm guessing here you are concerned about the bacterial contamination, right? Because animals eat raw meat in the wild. So what's the problem?
yeah. So this one is more of a. I think Chewy took liberties with this one because I think they get their answers from multiple sources. Because my answer was that we do use raw meat as a food source for animals. Um, it definitely depends on where you're sourcing from. I don't recommend, and I think most of us who practice this kind of medicine for animals don't recommend getting your raw meat from the grocery store because they may be a little more contaminated. That's
Mm-hmm.
why we're cooking what we're bringing home. There are good sources that do have cleaner meats, and a lot of my patients, when they're doing raw meat, I recommend using the pre-made frozen raw diets that are already balanced and appropriately sourced for just safety reasons. Some patients, some owners are just not comfortable doing food. They raw food. They do worry about contamination issues, and honestly, at that point, I don't really worry about pushing the issue, and I just try to steer them towards cooked versions of those foods.
Got it. Yeast dough and raw bread dough. What's the problem there?
They, I believe, have alcohol when they rise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one I don't think I answered either, but I think that was the answer
Okay.
on the site,
What
if I
about
remember
corn?
correctly.
What about corn on the cob?
Corn on the cob can definitely be a choking or obstruction risk. I tend to stay away from corn as a food. it's not one of the worst ones, but not specifically toxic itself, but just not one of my favorite nutrient sources. But corn on the cob, we worry about obstruction and choking.
Got it. And then salty foods in general. There's, yeah, salty snacks are all over.
Oh, yes, we love our salt.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So just like in humans, really high salt levels can cause dehydration. They can just cause issues with essentially dehydration. Like you need to be drinking enough water if you're having that much salt. If your pet happens to have a heart issue, especially a more advanced one, then that can cause more of a problem because that salt will make them retain water. And then if they're on heart medications, their heart medications aren't going to function as appropriately. So you have to be careful with those.
Got it. So once I have my pet on a fresh or a different, a non-kibble, non-processed diet, how soon do you see conditions start to turn around? Is it something I'm going to see fairly quickly, or does it take time?
I do see some patients that can respond in a couple of weeks. It depends a little bit on how chronic and how severe the issues are. My arthritic patients that are in decent shape otherwise, they tend to see improvements in just a couple of weeks. Some of my GI cases, even the more chronic ones, and some of my skin cases, you'll see improvements probably within 2 to 4 weeks. So I would say that's maybe 2 to 4 weeks is a safe bet for most animals. If sometimes they'll see some progress and they won't see that, maybe they'll plateau. And at that point, I'm reevaluating them to see, okay, looks like, hopefully we're either going in the right direction or maybe that didn't change things, and that gives me information on what to do from here. And then we're adding in herbs. I'm usually continuing to do acupuncture and adding in supplements and other treatments as needed.
Well, I found this real interesting walking through those lists of foods that are fine for us but can be toxic for dogs. Learned a lot, and I might want to have you back if you're willing to let's talk about some herbs that are beneficial for animals, for our pets, and also what human medications we absolutely should avoid for pets, because a lot of those are fine for us but toxic for them as well. Any last thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with?
I would just tell people, fresh food is really helpful for their pets. There's a lot of, I think a lot of information out there. There's a lot of changing going on in the industry. Even some of the big companies that make kibble are starting to get onto the fresh food train, and I think that that's very telling. I think we're going to hopefully continue to see that trend go in that direction, and feel free to add in other modalities like acupuncture and herbs for your patients, for your pets, to help them live long lives. We're up in North Jersey, happy to see any new patients that want to come out there. There's the American Holistic Vet Med Association, or the AHVMA, where you can Google them, and they have a little directory on their website that can help you find other holistic vets in your area.
Well, great. I will put links to the article that we just discussed. I'll put links to your practice, and then also that national resource as well to help people out. Those will all be in the show notes and in the description down below. Lisa, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Very interesting conversation.
Thank you. It was wonderful speaking to you.